After World War II, the tension between the two emerging superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, was at an all-time high. The threat of a nuclear war and sequentially the end of human existence as we know it was banging on everyone's door. Everyone's life was hanging on by a thread. Neither side wanted to budge or fall behind the other in fear of losing power completely. Technological development didn't stop with the atom bomb. It continued to get bigger and bigger, like you were rolling a ball of snow down a hill. At the beginning of World War II, we were still using mediocre biplanes, but in the end, we had fighter jets, Superfortress bombers, new technology. It was like when radio turned to a television, a complete shift in focus. It turned from bombs to chemical warfare to more biological weapons. Weapons that could enter in and change the mind itself. The most dangerous weapon is information. The United States was terrified by the concerns of a Cold War run by new Soviet mind control and brainwashing technology. Seriously, the thought of communist countries researching and developing mind control methods was the worst thing imaginable. The idea of being able to brainwash your citizens or anyone into believing in the communist agenda, or any agenda for that matter, is an extreme power. The solution for this was just to beat the other side to the finish line. And that's exactly what the United States government attempted to do, mainly the CIA. In the mid to late 1970s, over 20,000 CIA documents were released regarding the United States' most illegal undertaking. This is the story of how a single government agency planned and attempted to develop psychological, biological, and radiological weapons to turn both foreign and domestic spies into sleeper agents. This is Project MKUltra. MKUltra wasn't just one single project. Look at it as a web of experiments that were all interconnected with one ultimate goal: control. That didn't stop at some of the most creative experiments taking place. Many of these, as you might imagine, were very, very illegal. American as well as Canadian citizens were unknowingly or unwillingly tested on. These projects focused on hypnosis in many forms in order to look for ways to control human behavior, having been known to include the use of drugs and chemicals. In the wake of World War II, the US government was engaged in a large number of secret medical experiments designed to help win the Cold War, developing techniques for mind control to create a so-called Manchurian candidate. What is the extent of these brainwashing experiments? How did the CIA become involved in such far-reaching and disturbing research? In May 1953, scientists at Porton Down were researching one of the most lethal nerve agents known to man, sarin. The experiments were conducted on military volunteers, but the young servicemen had no idea what they were letting themselves in for, becoming an unsuspecting guinea pig in the war against the Soviets. After the Korean War, disturbing new intelligence reached Washington. Hundreds of American troops were still being held captive, subjected to brainwashing experiments, and then killed for a goal: to cause an individual to become subservient to an imposed control. When the search for a real-life Manchurian candidate begins, the CIA faces two main challenges: how to induce amnesia and how to program in new behavior. In 1957, Dr. Ewan Cameron, an eminent psychiatrist in Montreal, believes he has the answers. Cameron applies his techniques under the guise of normal therapy. There's a three-part technique, which started with an effort to wipe out past patterns of behavior, and this was accomplished through the use of particularly intensive, repeated high-level electroshocks, until no more convulsions could be elicited from a patient. He then plays tape-recorded messages through helmets that are locked to his patients' heads. This psychic driving forces them to listen to repetitive statements for weeks on end, to program in new behavior. The final phase was trying to wipe out all recollection of what had happened, and that was accomplished by putting people to sleep for 3,040 days, accompanied by different kinds of drug cocktails. That's not any kind of therapy. That's a brainwashing. Dr. Cameron was heavily interested in being able to erase and reprogram the human mind. And the CIA could obviously use that kind of power in many ways. These experiments would become so severe and damaging that patients who came into the hospital for symptoms such as minor anxiety and depression would leave with their minds fried. Not much is out of the question when it comes to the lengths the CIA would go in order to conduct their experiments. Operation Midnight Climax was kept relatively secret up until the mid-1970s. In cities such as San Francisco, California, and New York City, CIA-funded safe houses were built for one specific reason: prostitution. Well, not exactly that. Prostitutes did have a large role in this operation, but these rooms would be equipped with one-way mirrors. The CIA would often pay prostitutes in these cities a good bit of cash to bring men back to these hotel rooms so they could be observed, but not normally. After these women would bring men back to the safe house, they would prepare drinks for them, slyly putting LSD in the men's drinks. These men were never informed or told that they would be taking part in these experiments. It didn't end there. The operation soon expanded, and the CIA began to reach out to those people in restaurants, bars, and even beaches, all of which took place on American citizens who didn't even have the slightest bit of knowledge that they were being experimented on by their own government. In late November 1953, a group of United States CIA operatives from Camp Detrick took a weekend getaway to a lake house in Maryland for a little Thanksgiving retreat. In the group, Frank Olson, an Army scientist turned CIA employee, was given LSD unknowingly by the CIA supervisors, and just 9 days after his incident, he supposedly fell or jumped from a 10th-story window out of a hotel room in New York City. Olson's family would never see Frank's body again. He was immediately placed into a casket and taken back to Camp Detrick and kept locked up. That is until 1993, when Frank's wife died. They were to be buried together, and a second autopsy on Frank Olson's body was performed. There weren't any cuts or abrasions to be found all across his body, but instead, there was a large swelling on his head, as well as a large injury on his chest. It was definitely not from the fall. The CIA and the government agencies had been covering it up all along, from being killed to an accident. How many people were there like him in our country? The events of Project MKUltra are an enigma. Almost all of the records were destroyed in 1973 by Richard Helms, the director of the CIA at the time. All the information we have today is just a fragment of the entire picture. But from what we have, obvious claims about the ethics of the entire project can be made, or it's just another cover story. It's more than possible bigger things lie beneath. Many news sources you see will say that MKUltra ended in 1964, but funding continued throughout the 1970s under projects called MK Search and MK Often, which study things that we don't even dare to think about. This almost 70-year-long deep-rooted mystery may never truly be resolved. However, in June 2015, The Guardian newspaper published a leaked CIA document that permits the director of the CIA to approve, modify, or disapprove all proposals pertaining to human subject research made by the government. With this CIA new ability to ignore laws on human experiments, has America truly seen the last of MKUltra?